So, so America, the numbers don't lie. America has a monopoly on the world stage because America enslaves all the vehicles, trucks, all the terrestrial vehicles that make up the world transportation grid, depending on gasoline and diesel. And so America uses the power of the greenback petrodollar to control the European Union. Now, the European Union experienced trickle down economics based on this petrodollar. If you look at the GDP of Europe, is way, 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 way inferior compared to America. Why? Because the Federal Reserve and the Treasury Department of America devaluates the European countries' GDP currencies. So it's not like we're out producing them in America. America has an economy of more financial sectors, white collar economies. Uh, so America doesn't really produce anything that much. We outsource our technologies to Asia, whether it be our production capabilities of appliances, cars, smartphones. Everything is basically produced out in Asia. America just has a service economy, a banking financial service economy. And the way America props up its economy through the stock exchange and through the federal central bank and the Fed is to flood the world with gasoline. Europe, if you look at the GDP numbers of Europe, is way, way, way inferior compared to the GDP of America. So even Europe is held captive by the gluttony of greed of this petrodollar of America's greenback. And so Europe is playing second fiddle economically. The numbers don't lie. America corners the market when it comes to GDP. And now Asia, ever since World War II, the conclusion of World War II, America divided and conquered Asia. They dropped two bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki on Japan and made Japan into a sweatshop. They divided China and Taiwan, made Taiwan into a sweatshop. They divided North Korea in the Korean American War around the conclusion of World War II and divided Korea into two countries. So America made South Korea into a sweatshop. And the only reason America needed more production out of Asia, it was because after the gold standard, and I forgot the war in Vietnam, the Philippines, it just keeps on going on how America's sphere of influence has dominated the Asian region for a long, long time, for decades and decades. And so after the gold standard limited America's purchasing power, America started experiencing the limit of America's purchasing power. So Nixon during his administration said, well, since Roosevelt pegged the House of Salt and OPEC with the petrodollar, we might as well eliminate the gold standard and just print unlimited fiat based on the trading of gasoline. So ever since then, America started printing money out of thin air, started printing wealth out of thin air, unlimited wealth, printing currency out of thin air. And now they pegged the greenback to the gasoline dependency of the whole world. And so when Nixon went to visit Deng Xiaoping in China, it was because America needed bigger countries to produce commodity exports into Western Europe, meaning America and Europe. And so Nixon made an economical deal with China to become the biggest sweatshop of the Asian region. So they didn't figure. Eventually, what happened is that China has so much of a population that overnight they started rising up as an economical power. And a lot of America's manufacturing companies were located in China, as well as Europe's. And so now they feel that China is an economical threat that is threatening the Western powers. So now they want to revert China's economies back to rice paddy field economies, dirt poor, third world economies. So, but even in Europe, if you look at Europe's GDP compared to America, Europe is inferior. Their GDPs are way, way, way lower than America's yearly GDP. So Europe experienced trickle down economics too because of this America hegemony of a petrodollar that consumes the world to enslave everybody handcuffed and shackled to gasoline and diesel pumps. And so America has a gluttony. It's like it reminds me of a dope addict with a syringe needle stuck into their veins. Well, America's syringe needle is oil pipelines that are stuck into the vein of Capitol Hill. And the more they inject themselves with the greenback petrodollar to rule the world into a hegemony, the more addicted they are to that junk of gasoline. And even though it might choke off the planet and kill off the planet, because these gases of tailpipes emit globally tons and tons of carbon emissions globally. And now these carbon emissions are up in our atmospheres. This planet Earth has 5 atmospheres, layers of atmospheres. And these carbon emissions are up there, and they will be up there for thousands of years, affecting the weather formation of this planet. But America, people like Snake Oil Con artist Donald Trump doesn't realize the detriment that we're doing to our environment of this planet. Let alone he thrives of the petrodollar. He likes to take so much that his supporters will get tired of him taking, but he has no limit, so he's going to keep on taking. Trump was the biggest leprechaun trolling nations, sovereign allies, nation coffers for tribute to his grandeur. He tariffed Germany, he tariffed France, he broke up Britain from the Union for the love of greed. He said he would abandon Japan and South Korea in times of nuclear war if they don't pay their fair share. He extorted Saudi Arabia to pay up. He tariffed Canada, trolled Canada sovereign coffers. He did the same thing to Mexico with a global tariff war, showing the world that America is too greedy with gluttony for their own good. Not to mention that the world is already enslaved by America petrodollar, and all the gasoline that runs through all the country's gas stations, and the diesel fuels that run through all the international nations' gas stations of all nations, they are all enslaved to America's greenback. Now you start to see why America can afford to have $25 trillion GDP versus the other countries that they're stuck in inferior GDPs, currencies. It's not like America outproduces these countries when it comes to production. No, America is a white-collar banking society of accountants in New York, Billionaires Row. We don't produce nothing. But what we do control is the world transportation systems that's pegged on the greenback. Through the OPEC plus one organizations, America props up their currency as an economical leverage. They use it to subvert other nations with inferior currencies. No matter how much exports these nations do, America devaluates their currencies. So it looks like they don't produce that much when it comes to their exports or GDP. No, they probably produce just as much as America, just as equal as America. It's just that America has the number one reserve currency, and it's the petrodollar. So America puts its currency purchasing power above all nations. And the effect of that is trickle down currencies to the rest of the world's nations. And that's the true fact about the issue. The world is enslaved because of Capitol Hill. Part of they have a power trip in Capitol Hill and in the White House. And they love to brag their braggadocious ways. America is a world sole superpower. And they keep on bragging about those, oh, America is the beacon of democracy. No, America is a capitalism society run amok with gluttony. Not only are we choking off this planet and killing it for the love of greed, a snake oil con artist, Rockefeller fathers like drifter that is Trump and his oligarchs, Exxon and Carl Icahn gas refinery, oil refinery businesses that basically control him like a puppet. They controlled him just like a puppet. America's oligarchs within Trump administration when he ran for 2015 was Carl Icahn and Rex Tillerson. That was his true power behind the throne of the Oval Office. It was a quid pro quo for the oil industries to use Trump to enrich themselves and to further advantage America's petrodollar. That's why Trump laid down with Abdul just for Exxon to pump energy from the Russian Arctic into India and China through pipelines that ran through Afghanistan. So Trump was willing to send Pompeo over to the Taliban, free them out of jail, get them all out of jail, and promise them to turn over the government to them. Just as long as they don't threaten the pipeline that floods energy from the Russian Arctic with Exxon joint venture deals that would have run energy from the Russian Arctic into India and China. Trump was willing to lay down with the Taliban. And you know what they did? They ransacked the government and they brought Asa Kawahiri right back into the fold. If it wasn't President Biden swift action, Asa Kawahiri would have been controlling terrorist plots along with the Taliban to repeat what happened in 9/11. But that's how greedy this drifter of a con artist, snake oil remedy that Trump is. He'll lay down with anybody for the love of greed. He'll tariff the world into submission for tribute like a troll leprechaun. The pure gluttony of greed that he kept on saying in his 2015 rallies. I'm going to keep on taking. I'm going to take so much that the world's going that my supporters are going to get tired of me taking, but I'm going to keep on taking. He says that the world is raping us, that the world is taking advantage of our stupid leaders, but not no more. Now he's going to take, and he's going to keep on taking. So he inflicted a global tariff wars on our allies, nations, to extort them in their sovereign coffers. It's not bad enough that the world is enslaved to inferior currency purchasing powers, including Europe, compared to America's purchasing power. The European currencies don't have the same leverage as America's petrodollar that pegs the world gasoline and diesel trading throughout the world. That's why if you look at the GDP of Europe, it's way inferior. And it's not like Europe doesn't produce the same as America. They produce its equal or more than America, but they end up with inferior GDPs. Because America controls the world banking systems through the stock exchange of New York, the Treasury Department, the Federal Reserve. And like I said, America has Saudi Arabia as a flunky. While America subverts the rest of the OPEC members, OPEC plus one members, America subverts them, devaluates their currencies, gives their countries runaway inflations, threaten to overthrow their governments, but they cozy up to their flunky, the House of Saud. And that's how OPEC takes advantage of following the whims by the House of Saud to keep on floating gasoline pegged on the greenback of America's currency. So that's the truth about the thing, about reality. History of Asia, of the Middle East, for the Seven Sisters, the biggest oil companies of America and Britain and the Dutch, the biggest oil companies, ever since World War I, they divided and conquered and redrew the territories of the Middle East nations. Britain and America, after World War I, redrew the lines of countries' borders and Syria and Iraq. And ever since World War I and World War II, the Middle East has been warmongered genocidally for the production of oil. Those regions has been toppled and pillaged and plundered by the Western demand for oil. To this day, the House of Saud is a slave and is a flunky to the whims of Washington. So even Europe, like I said, Europe, if you look at the GDP numbers and currency value, Europe is way inferior with their GDPs as far as their currency purchasing power. Why? Because America keeps it that way. America doesn't want Europe to be more powerful economically than America's GDP. That's why Europe is playing second fiddle. Ever since World War One, America was in ruins. Ever since World War Two, America took advantage of that because Europe was in rubbles. So when Roosevelt sat down with the House of Salt and say, "Hey, now we're going to trade your oil, but in American currency," and that was the birth of OPEC. Ever since then, America and OPEC allowed members to join OPEC, but only on the whims of America's foreign policies. So while other OPEC members didn't like America's policies, in return, America crippled their economies, gave them runaway inflation, devaluated the currencies, tariff and sanctioned these OPEC members. And the only one that fared more well was countries like Qatar, Dubai, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, countries that were willing to cater to America's whims. But the only one really in charge of the flow of OPEC is the House of Saud, because America subverts the Middle East into the whims of their foreign affairs for the love of oil. How many Arabs have died for 100 and some odd years of gasoline combustion engines? How many genocidally Arabs have died in the name of war, of democracy, fake veil pretext of democracy, just for America to pillage and plunder those regions for the love of production of oil, just to prop up America's economy, to controlling the energy supply of the world, which gives America the advantageous positioning to grow their military and to devaluate every other nation's currencies. So America is the only one that's the strongest purchasing power currency in the world, to the point that America suffers from gluttony when it comes to GDP. Even Europe has inferior GDPs compared to the currencies. It's not because Europe doesn't outproduce us. No, they probably produce just as much as America, even more. But their currencies are inferior because America keeps it that way. America doesn't want Europe to be more economically powerful than America. The same for the militaries. America doesn't want Europe to overtake America. America loves Europe to be subservient to America's whims. Ever since World War One, but at the completion of World War Two, America was in ruins. Europe was in ruins. Europe, after the completion of World War Two, Europe was all in the rubbles, razed to the ground. As far as all the infrastructures of the European nations, after World War Two, Europe was a region of ruins, and America with Roosevelt and the House of Saud took advantage of that. To this day, Europe GDP purchasing power is way inferior. It's trickled down compared to America's GDP. And the rest of the world. And the poorest one is Africa. That's the poorest region because America likes to keep these regions submissive. Asia, South America, the Arab lands, the Eastern European lands, they're all, even, like I said, even Western Europe compared to American GDP, they're captive to America's trickle-down economics in their regions. If you look at the GDP of these countries, including Europe, they're all held captive to be inferior with purchasing power. Ask yourself why. It's not like America outproduces these countries. No. America don't produce shit. America produces white accountants or bankers, and they all are billionaires in America. While America's companies outsources their capabilities to Asia. America is just a land of economical sectors, speculators on Wall Street. That's what America does best, is speculate with gluttony, because we peg the world to gasoline, so we don't have to produce nothing. We can outsource that to poor regions and just live as a service economy sectors of white-collar careers. We don't produce shit, but how come we end up with the most valuable purchasing power of the world because we enslaved the world to the gasolines and diesel pumps of the world. In other words, America can cut the supply off to any nation's gasoline or diesel supplies and overnight cripple that nation into civil unrest, making the population overthrow the governments, and then they can use their economical weapon to drive suppressions of that nation's currencies and drive hyperinflations on any country they want to target. America has that type of economical weapon that they can deny gasoline supplies to any nation by controlling OPEC, meaning the House of Saud, by flunking the House of Saud, and then they can impose devaluations on that country, whatever country they're targeting. They can impose and drive their currency so low that it has runaway inflation. But ask yourself, how come America, if we don't produce shit, how come we always had the most highest GDP when it comes to currency? Because America controls the stock exchange, the currency evaluations of all nations, and they're headquartered in Europe. But Europe is held captive to America's foreign policies. Look at the GDPs of the European nations compared to the GDP of America. They're inferior. So America, even Europe, has been taking advantage of America. Like I said, after World War One and after World War Two, Europe was in a position of being razed to the ground, and all nations in Europe were basically in ruins after those two world wars. And America, after World War Two, emerged as a world sole superpower because we created the nuclear bomb. And so that gave America the hard power, along with Roosevelt pegging Saudi Arabia to sell gasoline with American oil fields in Saudi Arabia. They set up the motion of OPEC to be pegged on the greenback. So to this day, America doesn't produce too much as far as what we produce in America. We're a land of white collar bankers, societies in New York. That's what America produces. Is accountants and bankers, financiers speculating on Wall Street. And that's how they prop up the Treasury Department and the Federal Reserve. And we outsource all our production goods to Asia because America and Western Europe has used Asia as a sweatshop for the Western consumption, never-ending greed of cheap commodities that are produced in Asia. America went to war with Japan, Korea, China, Vietnam, the Philippines. We done basically our sphere of influence in Asia, along with Australia and Britain. We made Asia into a sweatshop for the never-ending greed of cheap goods imported into Western Europe, America and Western Europe. So the Middle East has been warmongered genocidically for 100 years now because of the love of Rockefeller making the cars dependent on gasoline. So the Arab nations has been toppled, pillaged and plundered, divided and conquered to maintain the supply of gasoline throughout the world. And so ask yourself, why America has a $25 trillion GDP while Europe nations can't even get past beyond 5 trillion or 4 trillion or 2 trillion. And that's Europe. Why Europe is so inferior with their currency GDP? Why? Because it all has to do with the devaluation of currency exchange. And America keeps every country on earth inferior, including Western Europe, where their currency exchange. America controls that racket. And America is the one that floods the whole world by controlling, flunking, and keeping House of Saud basically doing the whims of America's foreign affairs. Because the other OPEC members, OPEC plus ones, They're just going along for the ride because Western powers keep their nations impoverished. Iran, Venezuela, Russia, the African members of the OPEC nation, the nation of Africa that are members of OPEC, they're all kept inferior. They're be given economical sanctions, their tariffs, they're subverted, they're kept poor intentionally for the love of gasoline to be pumped by the House of Saud with the petrodollar throughout the world. And so it's a racket. It's an economical racket. And it's not only economical genocide by keeping the world inferior and keeping the world more impoverished with trickle down economics, with this greenback hegemony of petrol flowing gasoline throughout the world with only you can purchase it with American currencies. Not only is that a economical uh, crime, an economical weapon, a monopoly, a trickle down economics globally when it comes to currency exchange, but at the same time, at the same time, this gluttony, these junkies that have in America, these bureaucracies bipartisanly, they're like junkies with opiate needles stuck in their veins. America's politicians have the opiate needle pipeline of fossil fuel petroleums and pegging the world to gasoline like junkies. They can't get enough of it. And you know what's the end result of it? It's killing off the planet. Because tons and tons of carbon emissions are these gasoline tailpipes, vehicles of gasoline and diesel vehicles, trucks, diesel trucks, and gasoline cars throughout the world are emitting tons and tons of carbon emissions on this planet. And these carbons, like I said, are embedded. Hello, Moto. These gasoline, pegging the world to gasoline is keeping the world pegged, and it's for the planet. Excuse me, I keep getting interrupted. The planet has 5 layers of atmosphere, and for 100 and some odd years of the gasoline combustion engine, we emitted countless of tons of carbon emissions in our vehicles, in our manufacturing plants, emitting carbons into the atmosphere. These carbon emissions, fossil fuel emissions, are in our atmospheres, and they will be in our atmospheres for thousands of years to come. We can't just go up there and cleanse all the carbon, the tons and tons yearly that have been emitted for 100 years. We can't reverse that effect. But that effect would affect the planet for thousands of years to come. And that's why these people like Snake Oil Rockefeller, con artist Drifter, Rockefeller's father incarnated snake oil remedies like Trump is a dangerous fascist indoctrination that is driving the world backwards and destroying our planet. Because for thousands of years, these gases will be up there, and we won't be able to do nothing about it. And when the greenhouse effect starts depreciating the ozone layers, and the sun bleeds through the holes of our atmospheres because it causes depreciations in our atmospheres of our ozone layers, it causes the hydrogen and the carbons to heat up, mainly the hydrogen that causes the greenhouse effect. And we keep on emitting these carbons into the air. And we're basically choking off the planet. We're basically killing the planet. Ask yourself, park yourself in a parking garage. If you have a garage in your house, if you have a suburban garage in your house, go in there, park the car, but leave the engine running. Close the garage door and roll down your window. And I dare you to go to sleep, take a nap for 2-3 hours to see if you don't wake up dead by breathing all the carbon emissions out of that tailpipe. You'll die. You'll wake up dead in the afterlife, looking at your body stuck in a car because you breathed too much carbon emissions that intoxicated your blood levels and killed you. That's an analogy. That's what we're doing to this planet. We're choking it off. We're killing the planet off with carbon emissions. That's like an analogy for y'all can comprehend. If it's able to kill you, it's able to kill the planet. And the way it's killing the planet, like I said, all these tonnages of carbons yearly for 100 and some odd years of the gasoline combustion engine, countless of tons throughout 100 and some odd years, is causing an unreversible effect on this planet. And for thousands of years to come, these gases will be up there in the 5 layers of our atmospheres, and we won't be able to do nothing about it. And America is to blame. America is the number one culprit in the modern century that's causing these effects to be exaggerated. Like they're stepping on a gas pedal, exacerbating it. America is exacerbating the situation. And their gluttony, like the fascist Trump party, doesn't recognize it or respect nations or their freedoms or their liberties or their equal opportunities for having a fair and free economic systems, with the wealth of nations being imprisoned to trickle-down economics because of America's snake oil remedies. That's economical genocide, while the rest of the world is stuck in inferior currencies to be more economically disenfranchised as third world regions. And America loves that, to cipher off the world's commodities. In America, all we do in America is have banker agencies, accountants, lawyers. That's our economy. America's economy is just lawyers, accountants, bankers, and hedge fund speculators. That's how we maintain this 25 trillion GDP, while the rest of the world can barely get into the trillions when it comes to their currency, comparing to the American currency exchange. We don't produce nothing. We're lazy. We just like to live off of the fumes of interest when it comes to the petrodollar, giving us high purchasing power capabilities. While even Europe has trickle-down economics compared to the economic exchange of their currency GDPs compared to America. So the whole world is enslaved. And not only are we enslaving the world to be inferior currencies and inferior economies, but then we prop up military bases throughout the world to keep this hegemony monopoly of gas. And then we're killing off the planet at the same time with our greed and gluttony. Ask yourself that. Is it tolerable? Should we condone it as human beings on earth throughout the world? Members of all nations and their citizens? Should we condone this type of gluttony? Should we condone destroying this planet because of the few greedy oil oligarchs in America?